Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're talking about priority targeting on Elemental Shaman. I realized recently I talk a lot about lightning rod spread, like all the time, but I almost never explain the opposite side of that conversation, which is priority target funnel. And I had this epiphany in my recent Algeth'ar video where I talked a lot about prior targeting, and the link's in the description if you want to watch that. And I said things in that video like spread your rods or you want to funnel this mob, and then just kind of moved on like that was a complete explanation. But I realized that if you don't already know what that means, that advice is basically useless. And this is the important thing to understand because in actual keys, raw DPS and useful DPS are not always the same thing. So in this video, I want to focus about truly understanding that difference, when to spread, when to funnel, and how to actually make those decisions in real pulls instead of just guessing. If you watched any of my content, you've definitely heard me talking about lightning rod spread constantly. It comes up in almost every video I make about this spec, which is kind of all of the videos. But that's for good reason because lightning rod is a huge part of how Elemental's damage model works. When a target has lightning rod on it, it takes a percentage of all tempest, lightning bolt, and chain lightning damage you deal. So every additional lightning rod you have active is essentially amplifying and cleaving on everything you cast across the entire pull that has it. More lightning rods equals more targets eating that cleave damage equals more total output. It's super important for our damage averaging around 15% of our overall, which is why I harp on it so much. But I haven't really talked about the nuance of it, when spreading lightning rod isn't the right call, even when it is technically the right call to maximize your damage. In higher keys, the goal isn't so simple as more damage is more good, and that sounds like kind of a silly, stupid, and at the same time obvious thing to say, but the implication of it is something that a lot of players don't really fully understand. The most important thing in a high key is survival, and sometimes the thing that's correct for your group's survival and the thing that maximizes your damage output are pointing in different directions. Spreading lightning rod across a full pack is generally the right play when those targets are all roughly equal with the same exact threat level, same priority, and nothing in the pull is necessarily going to punish you for not ending it fast enough. But the moment a pull has a mob that's going to hurt someone if it stays alive for too long, optimizing perfect lightning rod spread stops being the right question, and the real question then becomes, what does this pull actually need? And oftentimes, the answer is not more overall AoE damage, but funneling as much damage as possible into one target as fast as possible, even if our damage meter looks technically worse because of it. But what is a priority target? Well, it's pretty simple. A prio target is any mob where the longer it stays alive, the more dangerous a pull becomes. More time alive might mean more casts going off, more tank damage, more unavoidable group damage, and just more chances for something to go wrong and wipe the key. There are generally two ways a mob earns this designation. The first is ability-based. It has something on a timer that's going to hurt your group when it goes off, and the only way to prevent that is to remove it from the equation before that timer is up. Dangerous casters, high damage tank buster mobs, mechanics that require defensive or healer cooldowns to survive. If the mob lives long enough to do those things, you're in a world of hurt. The second type of mob is a sustained kind of pressure mob. It's not necessarily about one big ability, it's more about the mob's whole presence that continues to threaten the group as a whole the longer it's alive. This is stuff like AoE pulsing damage, auras that buff nearby enemies, and that kind of stuff. Those mobs create a compounding problem the longer they're up, and every extra second they're alive is extra pressure on your healer and your tank that didn't need to exist. And the way to determine if a pack has a funnel target or not is really as simple as asking yourself a question before every pull. Just, what happens if no one does mechanics? And that sounds really silly and simple and stupid, but think about it. What happens if a cast goes off? What happens if a mob stays alive for too long? Pretty simple. If the answer is it's probably fine and everything just hits the ground at the same time, that's a cue that you can probably play your normal default lightning rod spread AoE web that you want to do to maximize your output. But if the answer is the tank might go down or someone might get one shot, then the mob that would cause that to occur is going to be your priority target. And that's when funneling becomes the correct play. Getting that answer before the pull starts, instead of realizing it after the dangerous casts are already being cast, is what separates a good Mythic Plus player from pugs. But let's make this more concrete, because the concept is a lot easier to apply when you see it in a real pull. The opening pull of Algeth'ar Academy has 3 large lashers in it, all muddled in with a massive bunch of little fluff mobs that don't do much. On paper, this looks like a pretty straightforward pull where you spread lightning rod across all of them and let your cleave do the work. But those 3 larger lashers in the sea of fluff mobs have a tank buster, and in higher keys, that tank buster absolutely demolishes tanks, and the only real way that pull will go wrong is if those lashers are still alive when the tank has run out of defensives to deal with any of those tank busters. So the right call in this scenario is treating all 3 of them as a priority and funneling damage into them as hard and as fast as possible so fewer tank busters get off. Generally focusing on a single one that goes down, then another one, and then another one. But let's look at another example with Skyreach. There's a mob in there called the Blade Talons, and these mobs have both a tank buster and a dash which hits multiple targets and applies a bleed. Not only is this a particular danger to the tank, but it is also significant danger to the group as well because that bleed kinda hurts. It's putting a lot of pressure on the healer not only to keep the tank up through the tank buster, but also triage the entire group who's bleeding from that dash. The correct read on this pull is the same as Algeth'ar Academy. The Blade Talons are the threat and they need to go down to relieve some pressure from the tank and healer as soon as humanly possible. In both of these cases, spreading everything evenly would produce a better looking damage number, but it would be significantly more dangerous and likely lead to a wipe. But the good news here is that shifting into funnel doesn't mean you're giving up your entire AoE setup. Earthquake is still going out, you're letting the lightning rod spread naturally across the pack with your lightning rod, and your chain lightnings are still bouncing and doing their cleave thing. The bulk of your AoE is pretty much handled by those 2 buttons, being Earthquake and Chain Lightning, doing what they normally do. What changes in funnel scenarios is where you're sending your Tempest and where you're sending your Elemental Blast, because those are the buttons you actually have real control over in terms of target selection. Tempest in particular becomes your primary funneling tool when there's a priority target and a pull. On a normal pull with no standout threat, you can tab target to your heart's content, spreading lightning rod across everything, but the moment there is a dangerous mob that needs to go down faster than everything else, Tempest goes to the target every single time and you stop thinking about spreading it. And if you want to take this a step further, if the pull goes from this is a priority target to this absolutely has to go down now, that's where you can even start shifting Maelstrom spenders away from Earthquake into Elemental Blast, but that's really not generally necessary. That scenario is much more nuanced simply because you're losing pretty much all of your AoE value here, but it's at least worth mentioning because those situations might come up. The way to think about it overall is that Earthquake and Chain Lightning are your AoE floor doing the spreading and cleave work for you in the background without you having to think about it much, and Tempest and Elemental Blast are just where the decision point actually lives. And yes, this will technically cost you a little bit on the damage meter overall. The cleave numbers won't be as high or as clean when you're funneling instead of spreading. But remember, in higher keys the meter isn't the goal. Keeping the pull alive is, and sometimes the 2 things are not the same. But real quick before we continue, this is my legally mandated please fund my crippling WoW addiction section where I mentioned I do offer coaching over on Patreon for Elemental, Mythic Plus, or just general raid help. Whether you're trying to learn the fundamentals, clean up your rotation, or just figure out why your keys keep imploding, we can pretty much go over all of it. So if you want help improving your own gameplay, the link's in the description. But enough about that. Let's talk about Earthquake. Now, if you've watched any of my Elemental Shaman guide videos, which you definitely should, they're fantastic, you're already aware of the general 4-target rule. If there are 4 or more targets, you Earthquake. If there are less, you Elemental Blast. I made an entire video comparing the 2 that you can watch if you're interested, but the context with that rule is that it is a damage rule, not a survival rule, and survival trumps all. It tells you when using Earthquake produces more total damage over Elemental Blast. It does not tell you whether spending your Maelstrom on a ground AoE is the right call or what the specific pull is needing at that point in time. But let's break it down a little bit more because there's a set of pulls in Algeth'ar Academy that illustrates this concept really well. The packs right before Croth with the small eagles and the alpha eagles mixed in. The small eagles are basically fodder. They don't do anything particularly threatening and are just really existing to be cleaved down. But the alpha eagles, on the other hand, are a completely different story. They have a dangerous frontal that you need to be positioned around and ready to move, and more importantly, they have an AoE screech that goes out and hits the whole group for a good chunk of damage. 1 eagle and 1 screech is manageable, but when the 2 alpha eagles are up at the same time on the 3rd pull, those screeches start overlapping in timing, and now you are in a situation when the group is taking back-to-back AoE hits with very little recovery time between them. At that point, you're burning defensive cooldowns, you're burning healer cooldowns, and once those are gone, the next overlap is very likely going to put someone in the dirt. The answer to that problem is not as simple as surviving the overlaps, it's making sure that second or third overlap never happens in the first place by removing one of the Alpha Eagles from the equation before they get the chance to do so. In that pull, you have 6 targets, which is a textbook Earthquake situation. But the right call here may be just to let Chain Lightning handle the cleave on the small Eagles and dump your Elemental Blast and Tempest into the Alpha Eagles since they have so much more damn health than the fodder little Eagle adds. We need to get their health down fast enough so that Screech overlap never becomes a real threat in the first place. Your Earthquake can still go out occasionally and you're not completely ignoring AoE, but your main focus should be on doing the thing that actually matters on that pull, and on that pull, what matters most is removing an Alpha Eagle Screech from the table. Your damage meter will look a little worse, admittedly, but the pull will go a lot smoother. And if you want more of a breakdown explanation of this, you can actually check out my Mythic Plus Algeth'ar video I linked in the description below, where I actually go over this specific mob pack in a bit more detail. But look, at the end of the day, the through line across all of this is that your default is to spread Lightning Rod to maximize your AoE and let Cleave do its thing. What the video is really about is recognizing when a pull shouldn't be your default and making that read before your cooldowns are already in the air, or adjusting your priority to match what the pull actually needs rather than what the target count suggests you should be doing. That adjustment is not mechanically complicated, it's just a decision, and like most decisions in the game, it gets easier the more deliberately you practice making it. But that's pretty much the video. If this helped you out, make sure to like the video, it really does help the channel a lot, and if you want more Elemental or general WoW content, make sure to subscribe as well. Also, I've been streaming over on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, so if you want to just hang out, ask questions, or just hang out while I raid or do keys, feel free to stop by. And if you want to support the channel a bit more directly, I've got a Patreon link below where I offer coaching and additional content, along with a Discord where you can talk about the spec, ask questions, or just hang out with the community. But yeah, that's all I got for this one, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you in the next one.